Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from The War on Drugs, titled Lost in the Dream. So, believe it or not, I actually do like indie rock, and it's always a little bit exasperating when the presumption is made that since I've handed out some pretty harsh reviews to indie bands as of late, that I might just dislike the genre, or, hate good music in general, because that tends to be the hyperbolic jumping off point. Because while I might listen to plenty of pop and hip hop and country and metal, I still do have a big spot in my heart for indie rock. And honestly, I'd much rather prefer to hear it on the mainstream pop charts than other miscellaneous crap that gets popular. However, I will admit that there are currently popular trends in indie rock of which I'm not exactly fond. The current brand of percussion-heavy, melody-light, reverb and effect-swollen, overproduced brand of indie rock, it's not exactly my cup of tea, especially in comparison with the jangly edge of mid-80s college rock, the explosive, distorted edges of the 90s indie scene, or the garage-inspired riff-based roughness of the early 2000s. And on top of that, I will wholeheartedly admit that I tend to be harder on indie rock than with grander ambitions and goals than on acts that are simply trying to make simple pop songs. Just because you step up to the plate with big ideas doesn't always win credits immediately in my books, unless you manage to execute those ideas well. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And thus, it's been a real treat for myself to revisit the discography of The War on Drugs, the band that was originally formed as a collaboration between Adam Granduciel and Kurt Vile. Now, I covered Kurt Vile last year on his album Wakin' on a Pretty Days very early in my videos, but The War on Drugs is decidedly more Granduciel's project, with Vile parting on amicable terms after doing a bit of work on the band's excellent second album, Slave Ambient, a record that features a blend of Dylan-esque vocals, mid-80s REM-inspired riffs, U2-driven bombast, and lyrics featuring some potent journeyman themes and some really honestly great songwriting. And considering their newest album, Lost in the Dream, the first without any involvement whatsoever from Kurt Vile, has been receiving rave reviews, I figured it was about damn time for me to give it more than a few listens. So, how'd it go? Well, my god, I was not expecting this. Not only is Lost in the Dream by The War on Drugs a good album, not only is it a goddamn great album that might actually be a step ahead of Slave Ambient, but it's probably just be one of the best albums you will hear this year. And if anything, it gives me all the more reasons to point at the current state of reverb-saturated indie rock and then point at this album and say, this is how it's done. Do it right, do it better. And even then, I feel it's selling short a record that I would consider probably one of the most gripping and emotionally compelling albums that I've heard thus far this year, especially on a thematic and instrumental level. And while there are a few flaws, they barely tarnish the whole of this record, which is beautifully organic, excellently written, and goddamn heartbreaking to boot. This was a real shocker for me, guys, and I couldn't believe how happy I was to hear it. Now, to begin, it becomes very important to acknowledge that this really is Adam Granduciel's project. As much as it's on a War on Drugs album, he considers it more of a solo outing, and it's not hard to see why, as it's an album long-rooted in Granduciel's passions and angst, to say nothing of his perfectionist drive, which manifested in the troubled recording process of this record. And it really does come across in his vocal performance, because while Granduciel's too oblique of a songwriter to lay everything bare on the line, his Dylan-inspired vocal delivery is controlled enough to both reflect a man trying to perfectly capture an emotion and not oversell it, and someone who's trying to hold everything together on the very edge of heartbreak almost constantly. The incredible thing is that he manages to make that delicate balance work, and it sounds as organic as hell. And the instrumentation reflects this very similar delicate balance between gritty Americana in the vein of Bruce Springsteen and Neil Young, and the spacey, almost effervescent synth lines that drift like clouds over the tracks. There is some tension between the very different production styles on display here, with the synths and guitars occasionally jilting into off-kilter moments, and the drum machines having rather spastic breakdowns. But again, it's organic, with every guitar tone fitting seamlessly into the mix and complementing the melody line carried by the piano, which sits mostly towards the back of the mix unless a richer organ tone is required. And yet the melody is prominent. It is the primary factor of driving forward the song. And like Kurt Vile's last release, there's a very thin, hazy grit settling across most of the guitars, especially when harsher edges of distortion materialize, albeit with a thicker layer of reverb. And unlike most modern indie rock, the reverb has a greater purpose. The spacious sound isn't just intended to evoke epic swell, but to conjure up the feeling of being alone on the wide open road. Just the journeyman musician, the dusty wind in his face stinging his eyes as he drives on and on into the sunset. And there are so many beautiful moments on this record. The harmonica and Eyes to the Wind, the mournful guitar slides and Suffering, the guitar solo on An Ocean in Between the Waves, the saxophone on Under the Pressure and Red Eyes, the synth crescendo and beautiful interplay on Burning with the more rough edges, and a moment of guitar swell in Reverse, which might be one of the biggest emotional gut punches you'll hear this year. It sent a shiver down my spine when I heard it, but look, you all know me. The lyrics need to be here too. And that's where Adam Granduciel somehow miraculously sticks the landing and turns this great album into something really special. And honestly, it's not exactly because of the startlingly great or varied wordplay. True to the genres in which he's drawing his influences, the songwriting is steeped in the wild dreams and simple journeyman styles of the boss, finding fleeting love and holding on to it as long as you can. But this is an album that's steeped in self-aware melancholy and very real desperation, trying to hold on to the fleeting moments of love before it evaporates into the endless haze. The framing of the songs is impeccable, as Granduciel keeps chasing for that heady moment of love and exhilaration, even though that he knows that his lifestyle and just various other things might inevitably drive him and his partner apart, that there will be that breaking point, and yet he's not going to stop trying. It's rooted in that deep-seated earnestness that made so much of Springsteen's material so powerful and emotionally evocative, and it's tempered with enough self-awareness to add very real, dramatic, emotional stakes. He knows that until he finds that special moment of love, there's then gonna be heartbreak after heartbreak, and not just for him, and yet he's not going to stop looking no matter how much it hurts. And he just has to stare into the wind with reddened eyes and wonders if the women with the hearts that he's broken, whether or not they feel the same. And he knows that more often than not, they'll both forget each other as they keep moving on, and there's a certain heartbreak to that as well. So look, at this point, I almost don't want to nitpick this album. I think it just resonates with me so strongly that I don't want to be going into being that harsher critic. Now look, I do think the stronger, more folk and Americana inspired songs are a little bit stronger overall in comparison with the slower, more ambient pieces. And I do think that more than a few of those songs that are a little bit underwritten, they are a little underwritten to fully encapsulate the poignancy of the lyrics. Sometimes a little bit more lyrical heft could help. And yeah, there's a few songs that run a little long, could have benefited for a tighter edit. And look, if you're going into this album expecting Kurt Weill's brand of psychedelic verve, you're not gonna get that here. But you know what? Even with all of that, Lost in the Dream is incredibly strong, rooted in genuine emotion that it gleans the best from its influences and makes it into something really real and really passionate and strong. There are moments of poignancy and emotional power in this record that I don't think will be replicated this year at all. And while the melancholy might off-put somebody who are looking for more of a lighter touch, the War on Drugs have made an album that rewards patience and many repeated listens. This album, for me, 9 out of 10, and I can't recommend it highly enough. If you got a passion for Springsteen and Dylan and the rock of the past like I do, and you want to see how it would look filtered through the melancholic lens of modern indie rock, you need to get this album ASAP, because this is indie rock that's done right. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Bit of a bit more quiet review this time, but guys, this record was incredible. You need to go out and get it. It's amazing. If there's any other albums coming out that you'd like me to take a look at, or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm more than happy to hear about it. So until then, I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.